All right, I think that means we're official, we're real. It's hard to tell with just our faces on here, but friends, it's lovely to see you all. Those of you who are just joining us now missed the conversation where we shared very vulnerably. We believe in Brené Brown and the power of vulnerability, and we all shared how weird we feel doing these video calls. So I'm glad you're along for the ride with us, and I know we have your grace as we talk through this really important subject of early childhood education. My name is Kate Zimmerman. I am the CEO of United Way of Lancaster County. I am just today here as your moderator because we have experts on this topic, far smarter than I am, who are going to share their experiences with their organizations and help us to understand a little bit more deeply this topic. We'll have time towards the end for question and answer, so please feel free to drop those in the chat as you see them. And I think right now what I'll quickly start by doing is introducing our sponsor for this session. But you're wearing two hats today, Senate, sponsor and also panelist. So first I will kick to you to tell us a little bit about the work of Kathleen Hershey Schools for Early Learning. So take it away, and then I'll introduce the panel after that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks, Kate, for that. Once again, good morning, everybody. We are just so excited here at the Kathleen Hershey Schools for Early Learning to be able to sponsor this event. Just such an important conversation that's happening. And so just a little bit about CHS. So the Kathleen Hershey Schools for Early Learning is a subsidiary of the Milton Hershey School. It's part of a $350 million initiative to develop 6 high-quality early childhood education centers across Pennsylvania. And so we provide non-residential weekday, year-round programming for children from 6 weeks to 5 years old, from under-resourced and overburdened background. And one of my favorite parts is that we're able to do this with all costs covered for our qualifying families, really trying to break making sure that cost is not a reason why families cannot get high-quality education. So each of our CHS centers, it follows a whole child and family success approach that's really designed to really provide quality education and integrated family services to support children in the classroom and at home. We provide children with essential resources, including meals, basic supplies like diapers, wipes, transportation as needed. We also offer on-site early intervention services, including physical, occupational, and speech therapy, and an on-site nurse, vision and dental screenings, and more. And then the second piece of all of our work is really about our families, right? And so how do we really kind of wrap around our families? And so for us at CHS, we have a family success team that's really dedicated to really partnering with those families to support them in building safe, strong, and financially stable homes. And this includes establishing goals, connecting them to resources, including housing, food insecurity, employment, education, and really the biggest goal for us is really how do we break the cycle of poverty, and how do we really lead to greater long-term family prosperity. We are currently operating our first location in Hershey, and we will soon be opening our second location in Harrisburg this September, and then beginning in 2026, CHS plans to open locations in Lancaster County, which include Lancaster City, Elizabethtown, and New Danville. And so we are really looking forward to joining the Lancaster County community, a community that Milton and Kathleen Hershey, who is our benefactors, were very passionate about. And we just know that there are so many already existing providers that are already doing this, many existing organizations. And so we are just so excited to just once again come alongside and just continue to work with all this. So we're honored to come and be a part of this conversation and have this important conversation to join the Lancaster County community over the next over these next couple of years, and just can't wait to be there. So thanks.
Thanks, Senate. We're very grateful for the partnership with Kathleen Hershey Schools for Early Learning, and also for the partnership of all the other folks on the call today. Early childhood education is one of the focus areas for United Way of Lancaster County, so this is a conversation we have often. But again, as I said, we know you're the experts on this topic. So what I'm going to do, before we get into presentation and then questions, our panel conversation, I'm going to give you a minute just to introduce yourself, if you would. I'll call each of you by name, and this is the hard part always, a quick overview of your organization, what you do and where you are, and then we will go to Lily. So I'm going to start with Lisa, and Lily, I'll end with you, and then we can go right into your presentation. So Lisa, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Lisa Eckert. I am the Director of Early Learning Programs for Packway Valley School District, and also work very closely with the Factory Ministries here in the Paradise area. As the Director of Early Learning, I provide a variety of different programming for all of our families within the district to help them prepare for kindergarten. So we do outreach services, we have home visiting, we have play and learns, and a variety of kindergarten transition activities. So my goal is really to reach all of the families before they enter into the K through 12 system and make sure that they have what they need to be successful.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lisa. Loretta, I'm going to kick to you next.
Morning, my name is Loretta Valente. I'm the Executive Director of Community Programs for Luther Care for Kids. And in my role, I oversee our 2 child care centers. We have one in Lancaster County and one in Lebanon County. And I also oversee our grant program that supports family and group child care providers in both Lancaster and Lebanon County. And I also get the privilege of being out in the community, being involved in teams and committees that support children and families so we can help them when they needed a service. We can make that warm handoff with connections. And I'm very thankful to be here today.
Thanks for joining us. We're glad you're here. Senna, I know we heard about the work you're doing at Catherine Hershey Schools for Early Learning, but why don't you just take a moment to tell us about yourself and your role there?
Sure. So, as I said, Senator Alexander, I am the Executive Director of the Catherine Hershey Schools for Early Learning. I'm also a proud alumnus of the Milton Hershey School as well. Have been in education now almost 20 years. Started as an assistant teacher, kind of worked my way up to where I am at now. Personal note, I'm also a father of 4, so understanding the parent side of everything and what the parent perspective looks like. And so once again, just honored to just be a part of this conversation, just to share some perspective on this important conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Senna. And last but not least, Lily, I'll let you introduce yourself and then you can lead us right into the presentation.
Perfect. All right. Hello, my name is Lily Dipner. I'm the VP of Education and Child Development for CAP of Lancaster County. We are the largest social service entity in Lancaster County. We provide services as a CAP across multiple family stability domains, right? So we have WIC, there's health and nutrition, household stability, which would include utilities assistance, and domestic violence services, Crispus Attucks, and education. So lots of different ways, lots of different realms. People have probably interacted with us in many different ways. They don't always realize it, but we're all over the place. My specific role oversees the early childhood department. So we provide services to over 1,000 children across Lancaster County and their families, and they are in center-based, home-based, home visiting, play and learns. I do a lot of collaborative work with everybody on this call. So so that's kind of exciting. And then yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's hard you're right, Kate. It's hard to say all the things in a nutshell, no matter how hard you rehearse it. So I get the privilege of doing the presentation today to kind of level set us and get us rolling a little bit. So I'll be super quick. It's really, like I said, it's just a foundation for the conversation. There are several resources that I've kind of pulled from to build this, and they can be provided to you at the end. So give me 1 minute while I move to screen sharing. Okay, so my panel friends, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see things pretty well? Awesome. All right. So today's topic, early childhood and Lancaster County. Hopeful if I touched it. Yep. All right. So let's just start really quick with types of early learning that can exist. This is not an all-inclusive list, but this is predominantly probably a large chunk of what we'll talk about today. So, you know, when we talk about infants, we're talking about children 6 weeks to a year. So you'll hear us say things like infant, toddler, young toddler, old toddler, pre-K, school age, K-12. And I'll talk a little bit about some buzzwords you'll kind of hear in here. But just so we know, when we talk about infants, that's the junk we're talking about. When we think about toddlers, that's 1 year to 3 years. And there are 2 groups within the early learning world. There's young toddlers and there's older toddlers. And that's really important because infants and toddlers are so different. So, you know, you think like, oh, they're the little guys, we can put them all together. What an infant needs, what a young toddler needs, what an older toddler needs is so vast. So that's why you break it up, right? So you can be sure you give them what individually that kind of group of kiddos needs. And then we can talk about preschool or pre-K. Probably for the purposes of today, they'll be interchangeable depending on where you are. Some people will use them in different realms, kind of, you know, from a federal perspective or a state and grants perspective, but they'll be pretty interchangeable today. That's the 3 to 5 years and anything before entering kindergarten, right? So once they hit kindergarten age, that's when we're gonna, you know, really refer to them as school age or K-12. And then home visiting. So home visiting, for those who are not familiar, is services for children infant to pre-K that go into the home and they support learning alongside the parent as a coach. And so in this realm, it really lives into the and honors the idea that the parent is the first and most important educator for their child, and a home visitor is a coach for that. Okay. All right. So buzzwords that you'll hear. Publicly funded is a buzzword that you'll probably maybe hear us refer to, or that will be in anything that you might read. This is programming predominantly funded by state or federal dollars. This can include pre-K counts, Head Start, early Head Start, parents as teachers. There's HISAP, which is state Head Start, but we won't get into that because it gets confusing. And so there's a lot of other things that fall into that, but we're just going to kind of talk about that chunk. So that's publicly funded, really any programming coming from state or federal funds. Privately funded is programming funded by families. I think, and Senate, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on this. It can also include funding from like a trust or some type of larger funder that, like in the Catherine Hershey world, you look a little bit like a Head Start, but it's not quite funded the same. So I think that that's kind of, I get that right, but that's not usually my cup of tea. So subsidies is really important because this can be confused. Subsidy is funding supported typically by the state that supports families with paying a portion of childcare. So these are families living at certain income levels. They need to be going to work or school, but it subsidizes a chunk and then the family only pays like a copay. Wrap care is that full day care. It can often be referred to wrap care, and it's typically around 10 to 12 hours. School year care is typically around 6 hours and 9 months, right? So wrap care is what you think intuitively as childcare, and school year is what you think intuitively as K-12, but preschool and sometimes infant tots, but not really often, can fit into both of those categories if needed. Whole family supports is a really, really important topic to remember and think about, but I wanted to bring it up. It supports provided to the family that would include goal setting, work on educational, access to basic resources, etc. Earlier, you heard Senate kind of really talk about all of the ways that they support families, and that's a beautiful example of wrap care. So First 10 is the first 10 years of a child's life. And there is an initiative within Lancaster that is known as First 10. We do oversee it at CAP, but it is large and collaborative, and it goes across the school districts and the early learning community. So those are just things that you'll hear that kind of helps clarify what they are. I know that's super fast, so you will have this PowerPoint. I did share it. So current landscape of Lancaster County, just so we can kind of level set. When we think about access to quality publicly funded care and supports in Lancaster County. So I am going to intentionally just give the caveat that this is about publicly funded access. Not all private, but some private and non-regulated sites are very hard to pull data on. So keep in mind that those types of things exist. So sometimes you might be like, but I know there's a childcare facility, or I know my friend babysits down the street, or this person, correct. And if they aren't licensed, they won't show up on data. And so just FYI, that's kind of a caveat. So from infants and toddlers, Lancaster County has 81% is unserved of children who could qualify for publicly funded childcare. From Pennsylvania, that's 75. So we are actually trending higher than Pennsylvania average. In pre-K, we have 82% unserved, and actually as Pennsylvania, that's 54%. So what that tells us is that there's a significant deficit in Lancaster County for pre-K services. I mean, the deficit is pretty significant in infant toddler as well. There's just quite a gap with Pennsylvania in pre-K. And then from home visiting, you can see it's 98% and 98%. Home visiting, when I experienced it during the pandemic, is like the lost secret sauce here. Like there is just something beautiful about the way that that combination works in a way that I think that even any family can really benefit from. And so it's not a well-funded initiative, but that, so right now we have only like 2% of our entire state population who gets this support. So top challenges in the industry, qualified individuals, humans, right? I was never really pro cloning before the pandemic, and now I'm fine with it. And so we could just clone humans and put them in classrooms, I would be a happy woman. So qualifying individuals, the teacher pipeline has a low enrollment rate, period. Stop. You know, it's the idea that a hose trickling is a hose trickling. You know, you're going to have to go to the source to address the end result. So this, what we're experiencing right now, is very much an end result of the fact that the pipeline is not running well. There's about a 5-year lifespan for teachers and administration. We talk a lot about teachers in the front line, insanely important, absolutely huge value. We do not talk a lot about the leadership that runs organizations. And the thing that happens is that there's a high turnover in there as well. And once you have a leadership turnover, we all know what the trickle-down effect is, right? So it's definitely something to keep in mind. The more credentials an individual gets in the early learning community, the more they are likely to move to a school district where higher pay is significantly easier to access, right? So the more we say we want to help individuals grow, which is an amazing opportunity and a huge recruiter, the better they are to a district and the more likely we are to lose them. Cost of care. I'm sure any parent, grandparent, aunt, or uncle who has discussed cost of care will understand this one. The cost to pay staff a good wage, create quality environments, and meet the regulatory requirements does not meet the state reimbursement for the cost for a child. It is not the same. Or is it so costly a family could not afford it? So there's a money gap there, right? So I want to note that none of this information includes the additional barriers any family with a child with special needs will encounter, right? So this is a typical family. Take all of this and now add on everything else for a family with a special needs child, and it becomes quite a challenging barrier. So quick, because I'm down to 3 minutes, we're going to talk about the top challenging impacts for staffing. So wages, right? Huge one. Here's a great example. Pre-K counts teachers are expected to have the same credentialing as a kindergarten teacher. They make about $37,000 a year. A kindergarten teacher makes about $75,000 a year. That's a huge wage gap. People who stay in early childhood stay because it's a passion and it's a heart, because they certainly do not get paid to stay. So wages, huge. Benefits. Often unknown is that most early learning providers outside of large agencies and corporations are completely unable to provide benefits. And they just don't offer them. They can't afford them. And their team, they don't pay enough for people to go to open market. It's a very catch-22, right? So I think it's important to know when you look at a district, there's benefits. When you look at a CAP, there's benefits. When you look at Catherine Herthy, there's benefits. When you go to a small organization down the street, there might not be benefits. And there is also a high burnout rate in this role, very, very, very high. Individuals who work in the early learning spectrum give a huge amount in. There is not always a lot in return, right? Children are in process of growing. Anybody who works with children and understand that you can hug and kiss them and tell them how wonderful they are and help them in all the ways, and they'll still go, ah, I hate you, and then walk away. So right, that feels kind of yucky when you get that day after day. So that's challenging. And I will also say that the needs often exceed the teacher training. So when you think in K-12, there's special education, there's behavioral supports, there's OT and PT, there's all sorts of pull out or push in resources. In early childhood, that does not exist. IU 13 will come in and out and they can do pull in services and whatnot, but there is no like paraprofessional who's going to come into the classroom to help out. There is no special education classroom a child might, be working with. This is the teacher and their team. End and stop. That's it. And so they are not taught, general education teachers, on how to support that. And they support with their heart, but that's about it. And so it is very easy to burn out because you are not necessarily as equipped. Okay, so, oops, I forgot to add my slide. You will get them. The resources that I refer to in this are all from state and federal legislative advocacy groups. And they give a lot of the data, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I know it's a little glum, so hopefully we'll pepper it with some good conversation. There's lots of hope and innovation, but it's a big topic.
Yeah, I think, it's glum, but as Senate mentioned, being a dad of 4, I have 2, and I think anyone who's this is the week I always think of as the week when the college kids went back to school. And it was a scramble with small kids before school actually started. So this is glum, but also the reality for a lot of folks. And there's no point ignoring that. So thank you for sharing all of that. Also, thank you for sharing buzzwords and definitions, because I know when we're in something and we do something well, we forget how much insider speak we have and how it's not always translatable to other folks. Thanks, Lily. That was very helpful. I think what I will start with first, and this is a question that all of you have some variation of, but what are other barriers aside from what Lily just mentioned to accessing early childhood education? Because that's our topic today, access to early childhood education. I see for Senate, we have what role do socioeconomic status and race play in determining who has access to high quality early childhood education. So I think I'll start with you and then we'll go around.
Yeah, sounds good, Kate. So thank you. Yeah. So I'll start with just the socioeconomic status, and Lily already kind of touched on this already, right? So one, just families just with higher incomes just generally have just greater access to high quality early child education programs. So they have actually a program that they can actually send, and they can then pay for that program for those children to go there. And as we've seen, the biggest barriers that they can afford to go to, whether it's private school or to a child care center or just live in neighborhoods that already have a well-funded public program that's already there. Whereas what we see, just I think with lower income families, is that they struggle to afford that quality care, or they have to rely on less expensive or lower quality options that are also out there as well. And so that then obviously has a cascading effect that then really kind of perpetuates the cycle of poverty that continues to keep going. And then they enter school with, once again, just less preparedness for kindergarten, which then stops all of the things when it comes to long-term academic success. And then when you think about also, this is also very much linked to also race as well. And it is just kind of, when you think about the just broader just issues that we just have in our center, in our society, when it comes to just, once again, children of color, when it comes to particularly Black and Hispanic children who are more likely to live in under-resourced communities. So we also see that, and with those under-resourced communities, they then once again no longer they have scarce or unaffordable resources. So once again, it just becomes a compounding effect. And so once again, this is the reason why for all of these things, we have to increase our public investment in early child education across the board. We have to continue to look at, once again, as Lily said, in terms of like the cost of actual providing care, how much it actually costs to provide care, and the reimbursement that we're actually getting. Those two things have to match one another if we actually want to start to break down some of these things. I also think that we also need to think more, I think, around our community partnerships and how we can think about those wraparound services and how we are helping families, because there are so many barriers, like transportation is a barrier. Just being able to, once again, just the access of, how many hours is even the daycare open because of, funding things. So I think there's a lot of things that we can, as a community, but we also need that investment from, I think, our governmental agencies to help us with all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Loretta, I'm going to turn to you next. What barriers and disparities do you see in the work you're doing?
Well, I'm going to echo what Senate had said. One of the things we see a lot is there's just not enough childcare out there. And those childcares that are out there also there's huge waiting list for that. I think someone I talked to recently said it best, and there's a supply and demand issue. There's lots of a need for it, but we don't have the capacity for a variety of reasons. And we know that childcare is one of the number one barriers to getting and maintaining employment. And people have to make choices. Am I going to go to work? Am I going to pay my childcare? And we continue at the childcare centers get calls. And most recently, I had a young lady who's unfortunately childcare center was closing down. She was a full-time worker. She ended up being on 4 different wait lists, being told that it could be 3 to 5 months before an opening occurred. We were blessed to be able to have an opening, but we were 60 minutes away from her. So that becomes a challenge for the working families, so that the accessibility and the wait list. And then when you talk about putting someone who has other barriers, maybe a low income family, just like Senate said, they're dealing with additional issues, because one of the other barriers that low income families face is often transportation. They either don't have a reliable car, they don't have a car at all, or they're relying on a bus line that may not go to where their daycare is or to their job, or they're jumping in and off a bus. And a lot of times, sometimes they're working second and third shift. And that becomes a problem because there's not a lot of programs that offer second and third shift. And also a lot of your bus lines aren't running that late at night. And then there's always the thing of a language barrier that can come into play. So I think all those components really play into some barriers that come forth for childcare.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's a perfect example of how interconnected communities are, right? It's, you don't fix one thing by pushing the lever here. It's so much bigger: housing, transportation, workforce, and important to keep that in front of us as we have this conversation. Lisa, for you, what are some of your techniques or recommendations for how we address these disparities?
So I think along with what Senate and Loretta said, we have the same issues in our area as far as transportation, availability. We have very few early learning centers, childcares, pre-K programs in our area. So having opportunities for families to actually experience early learning opportunities and activities is something we've really stressed in our area, as far as offering play and learns, offering the home visiting, offering those different types of things for a family that maybe doesn't qualify for that publicly funded pre-K program. We come across a lot of families who are kind of in that in-between state. So we have a lot of families that, are higher income that can afford some of that higher quality, educational or childcare experiences. We have families in the lower income realm that are going to qualify for the publicly funded, but there are a lot of families in between that maybe have to choose, like Loretta, you were saying, do I send my child to a childcare center or do I work? So I do feel like a lot of concentration needs to be put and focus on that population and what can we offer and what can we do to help those families access really high quality early learning experiences as well. Just one example too, that we've been able to do in our district. We are very rural. We don't have, busing and different things. So what our district has done is partnered with organizations like CAP and helping provide transportation for our students who are going to the preschool programs in our area. So they can ride the bus to and from, which kind of eliminates that barrier that a lot of our families have when it comes to transportation. So I think trying to be very creative and looking at our population and looking at the people that we want to serve and that are, in need of those resources and finding creative ways to help them.
And having this conversation, right? I remember being a younger single mom of 2 and not signing up early enough for the wraparound childcare at school. And it was really my first explanation and introduction to how challenging this situation was. And saying, I need this. You don't understand. I don't go to my job if we don't have this, and I need to go to my job. And the directors really laid out for me, right? You can help us recruit somebody. This is what the qualifications are they have to have. This is how much money they will make. And just this summer, I had a conversation. Mine are old now, 17 and 20. It's lovely because they don't need summer care. But had a conversation with a young mom, and she was in a panic. She said, nobody told me I was supposed to be signing up for summer programs. way before the summer started, and now I don't know what to do. So I think even raising awareness and having some of these conversations about those folks who maybe could access care, but we just don't have the resources to provide care for all the kiddos. That's really helpful. Lily, what are some of the innovative approaches you're seeing at CAP?
Yeah, so I think, Lisa hinted or hit on one of them. So definitely understanding how shared services and collaborative services impact access, quality, and cost, right? Because for as much as we'd all like to think it doesn't come down to the dollar, it comes down to the dollar, right? And so a great example, and I'm going to use the PV as my launching board, many moons ago. So this is probably much more expensive now. A bus cost us $85,000 a year to run. Just one tiny bus. Because we run small buses. To partner with PV, it's $6,000 and they donated. So, it's a significant difference, and it is the difference between 85,000 is a lot of children who could be served. So it's, do you give transportation or do you serve more children? And that's really the choice that comes down to it in many ways, depending on what the resource is. So that's a really huge innovative opportunity. I would say the other one that really hints at the idea of shared services is understanding how we share enrollment lists, right? So there's some kind of language around like we share lists, and I'll say from someone sits boots on the ground on that, it's a lot of language. I don't know that I can say that people are shooting waiting lists all over the place, but the idea of a centralized enrollment hub where like everybody is a little bit on the bipartisan side, I'm not necessarily working for any one person, but I can help a family understand where the resources are, how to access them, what the cost is, what their subsidy could be. Most people have no idea. I was a pre-K counts parent for my older two. My younger one just didn't qualify, but he got to come into my program. So I was a PKC mom, and it was really interesting because I never accessed subsidies for childcare. I had no idea. I work at CAP, but no idea that I could have been getting subsidy for childcare and not scrimping by that whole time. Now I live in a very rural area of the county, and I grew up in a rural area. There just weren't resources like that. So Kate, to your point, awareness. Right, people need to understand that they're there. And I think another innovative opportunity is how the business sector buys into this. We're living in a big nonprofit and education sector. There's not a lot of excess dollars. And there may be big budgets, but it's very restricted. So when you look at my budget for Head Start, it is one of the larger early childhood budgets with one of the better cost per child. But it's very restricted. I have lots of regulations on how I can spend my money. It is not just up for grabs. I cannot just make whatever decision I want. And so in the business sector, it runs very different. So you can think about an innovative way that businesses could hold slots in childcare facilities for their staff, right? And then their staff pays a portion, and now it's a benefit. I know that sounds really crazy. And that's really off the wall, but that could happen, if the cost per child is, $1,000 a month. And I, as a business owner, want to hold 5 slots for my staff members. I pay $5,000 a month until they're filled. And then the staff member picks up a portion of them, and maybe I still cover it, so they get it at a discounted rate, even with subsidies. So, it's definitely, there's an opportunity there. Between the shared services, between the business sector kind of coming in and rallying to the cause, if you will. But, it'll take some thinking and some working, but I think there's lots of opportunities. We are not we have lots of resources here in Lancaster County. We're okay. So we can pull together, but.
Well, in a tight labor market like the one we're in,
Yeah.
there is incentives to keep your employees employed.
Yep.
And, if there's a tight ratio and the daycare teacher is sick that day and a center has to close, that impacts productivity for the workplace. So there absolutely is a motivation, I think, at this point to have these conversations with the business community too, because it's mutually beneficial, right? It's not just we're doing it for these reasons because it's important for kiddos to be in early childhood, but also We want moms and dads and caregivers
Yeah.
being able to work and not having to worry about absenteeism or all of those things.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Lisa, maybe you can tell me a little bit more about the role of private sector and the philanthropic sector in supporting the work that the important work of early childhood education and access.
Thanks. I actually love this question when I was looking over it and I saw it ahead of time, because I think Pequea Valley has a really unique story on how we have been able to combine all parts of our community and make a program really successful. Anybody that knows Pequea Valley in our area has probably heard the story told, but our early learning program started because we had a faith-based, a church wanting to help the school district. We had a business, Urban Outfitters, wanting to help the community and the school district as well. We had the Factory Ministries, which is a nonprofit, faith-based organization. We had CAP come in, and all of us came together to form what we call our early learning programs, United Way support with a collective impact grant. So we were able to take all of these different pieces, a business, a church, nonprofit, school district, and come together and form what we do right now, which is our early learning programs. So being able to say and kind of break down some of those barriers. I know, Lily, your idea, and how we think, oh, that's so crazy of having a business help pay for childcare is not so crazy to me or to anybody who's been in this area, because that's how we all come together. We work because we need to make sure that our littlest learners have what they need. We need to make sure our families have what they need. And when everybody recognizes that, amazing work can happen. So I think it's a matter of, like I said before, you have to be creative. You have to be a little adventurous and seeing what you can do. Everybody has to know their role and know their part in these types of things. But I think having conversations, communicating, seeing what everybody is willing to do and how they can help, and then bringing it together is really essential. Like I said, we had all these different parts come together and start what we're doing right now. And we provide and serve hundreds of children each year through all of our programs. We, connect with families. We help families get the resources they need. Senate was saying, how Catherine Hershey School is really looking at the whole family. That's what we do too. We want to look at the whole family. We know when we have healthy families, we have healthy children, we have, lead to success. We, want to work with families and help eliminate and, generational poverty and all of those different things that, are facing our communities. So looking at what each kind of sector can do and how they can support, and whether it's a grant, whether it's helping provide funds for professional development, resources and technology, whatever it is, there's always a way that everybody can kind of join in and help. So
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate that. Loretta, we've talked about the philanthropic sector, we've talked about some of these business partnerships, but what can policymakers and educators and communities do to improve access to early childhood education right now?
Again, I'm gonna kind of go back. I mean, they have to realize how important early child education is. I think we've come a really long way with that, but we still run into some folks that really think childcare is still just babysitting. So a lot of it's awareness and education, bringing your voice up, talking to your elected officials, how important this is. Do they understand how many childcare programs have closed over time? When I was talking to PACA the other day, from 2020 up to 2023 in July, there was a net loss of 600 programs, and that's huge. And when someone closes, that's less access, that's less parents going back to work. And it all kind of becomes what several folks have already said. It's this ongoing, like almost like a rolling ball that folks, can't work, they can't get childcare. So I think that the elected officials just need to know how important this is. So talk to them and about what's going on in your community. And I always say, if you have an opportunity to go into a childcare center, call about their volunteer opportunities, see what they're doing, step into those programs to see how they are teaching our youngest. I love the word little learners. Someone said how they are learning, because our teachers are paramount. They're showing our children and preparing them, not just academically for school, but socially and emotionally, everything they're going to need for life success. So have those conversations, be willing to talk, step into a childcare center and see the great work being done. And again, all the ideas we're hearing. So let's have more conversations about what Lily and Lee-Sing had talk about, how we can do shared services and how we can promote that moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful jumping off point. Senna, it's nice to see you. We all were nervous and I thought maybe we'd scared you off completely here.
Nope, didn't scare me off. Just technology problems. We need better technology in early childhood education. That's everywhere, not just early childhood education, better technology.
I'm gonna actually pick on you now that you're
Sure.
back. So, hypothetically, we've talked about the partnerships, we've solved the question of access. So what does high quality early childhood education look like?
Yeah. So I think when we think about high quality early first, and this was actually said I think by Lily in the beginning. Like first, it starts with leadership, right? So it starts at the top, and just like the leaders that are obviously that are on this it starts there and it's a trickle down effect. And so one, how do we really kind of find effective leadership? And then once again, how do we invest in our leaders, because we need people that actually stay past 5 years. 5 years is not enough to actually really get really deep relationships with your staff members, with your children, with your families, and really to be able to do it. So I think it first starts with leadership. Secondly, then it goes into, yes, the other piece of that equation is that we actually then need to actually have highly qualified staff that actually stay there and actually also want to be there, not going to just kind of basically kind of run to K through 12 or run out of it. And so how do we invest more in our staff members, not only from just a compensation standpoint, but also from a professional development standpoint? One of the things for us for CHS is that we work very hard of like, how do we really be very much intentional about the professional development of our teachers, right? So one, we have a coaching model that we utilize with coaching our teachers. We also do a year-long of professional development, even before our centers even open, really to really prepare those teachers before they get into the center, because we just know that once again, to the point that I think that Lily also made of like the needs of children, we know the needs of children are great. How do we scaffold our teachers and our family and our leaders up to be able to meet those needs? And that is going to have to take a really big effort for all of us in thinking about that. And what does that look like when it comes to whether it's once again to this shared services model level? Is there shared PD that could happen, right? So how are we pulling together to get professional development for our families, for our teachers? And then lastly, the last thing I'll just talk a little bit about is just once again, and then it actually goes to the actual program model. So what the actual things that happen on a day-to-day basis, right? So once you have solidified the leadership, solidified our staff members, like what actually is happening on a day-to-day basis. And I do think that, so first and foremost, once again, how do we make sure that we have evidence-based curriculum that is happening in the classroom that once again prepares students for not just kindergarten, because that's just the start of life, but actually is giving them good foundational skills like social emotional skills, cognitive skills, health and wellness skills, all of the things that they're going to need, not just to get to kindergarten, but that they're going to need all through life within there. So how do we really make sure that we have a good program that one helps with that? Secondly, then it comes to family success. We have to have an ability to, once again, how do we continue to wrap around our families? Just as we've said, parents as the first teacher, if we're not also helping our families, if we're only saying one thing during the day, but our families are saying something different at the end, like once again, a child that does not get us to the outcomes that we're trying. How do we align ourselves together between both the families, what the families are saying and what we are saying, and that we're all on the same page and that we're all there to help all of each other through all of this. Whole child supports. So how do we break down those barriers when it comes to, once again, health and wellness? Like once again, it's very hard to have a toothache and be able to pay attention in class, or be able to not have a behavioral issue when you have a toothache, or when you're having a health issue, or when you're malnourished because you haven't had the food that you need. And so how do we break some of those things? And then lastly, I can't say enough about continuous quality improvement, that we have to continue to say, how do we continue to do better in all the work that we're trying to do with how do we get better? Like we can't say the things that worked for children 20 years ago are still going to work for children now. And how do we keep looking at our programs to say, what's working, what's not working, and being okay with saying, hey, this is not working. How do we fix it? Because that is what's going to get what's best for our families. And I think when programs can do those things, those are the things. The problem right now that we have is that programs are getting hung up so much on the first piece, which is finding high quality leadership and high quality staff, that they can't get to the second piece of all of those other things that we actually want to get to. So how do we solve both of those things to actually get to the equation of actually outcomes that we want to get to? So.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you, Senna. I appreciate that. Lily, what innovation are you seeing? Both in access and in quality childhood.
Access and quality. So I think from an access perspective, So we've been working through something, and it's, you know, we've chatted a lot about it here at CAP, called the blended and braided funding model. So in a blended and braided funding model, it means that you bring a lot of different types of funding to the table, maybe state, federal, public, private. And you look at all the ways you can use those funds, and then you integrate them like a braid or blending, right? Just so you can think about it, into one cumulative program. So one of the great pieces about this is when you look at Head Start and their regulations and their performance standards, they are incredibly high quality when it comes whole family and curriculum. Absolutely. I mean, they're high quality in a lot of areas, but there's two, they shine the brightest. In DHS, their health and safety is really high. And, you know, you can argue whether or not some of it is unnecessary. And the only reason I pick on that is because when I was trained how to actually do a real diaper change from a DHS perspective, it was so different than how I would ever change the diaper of my child. However, go Google it, see what the training is, and you'll go, what? But that being said, it is significantly better in many, many ways. And so when you put the two together, you have something that's even higher quality than any one standalone. And that was something we noticed when we started to really put together all of our funding, and we go, well, they match here and they match here and they're a little different here. But instead of taking anything down, we leveled everything up to the highest quality. And so what was interesting too is it allowed us to use the funds in a specific way that could elevate payment of certain things, get higher quality resources in classrooms, because Head Start could pay for certain pieces and childcare could pay for certain pieces, but they were never paying for the whole thing. And so I would say that's a really innovative thing that is absolutely shown to work. It has been vetted 100%. And so that's kind of interesting. I would also say the investment, you talked a little bit about it from the philanthropic perspective. So Steinman and the STEM Alliance are huge investors in the early learning community. And they are very eager for innovative opportunities. And I will say that what happens from the philanthropic investment is that when you can show that it works, you can move legislation to permanently fund it, right? So we know that philanthropy will not necessarily carry everything forever. However, it can be the seed money. And so that's happening all the time. And I think there are lots of organizations that could be doing that, you know, giving little grants out, doing things like that, and allowing it to be innovative. Don't put too many boxes on it. So you asked me a second part to that question, but now it has escaped my mind, Kate.
I said access and then also high quality. What are some of the trends you're seeing in high quality early childhood education?
Yeah. So some of the areas I'm seeing is some collaboration with districts, which are kind of neat. So like an early learning professional who is a professional in early learning and honored as such, and then professionals in the K-12 kind of come together and make a really nice big whole pie. So that's been kind of neat. Some of the other innovations is the work with secondary or post-secondary ed and universities, how to get things in universities, how to help them be lab schools, how to think not just about curricula and how to teach math, but how, or reading and writing. It's really how to be a holistic teacher, and then even how to be a leader. Right? Like, what are the other choices? Because I didn't go to school to sit here. I went to school to teach children. You know, I thought I would be a kindergarten teacher my whole life. Well, never got to be a kindergarten teacher. Taught Head Start. You know, fell in love with it, just like Senate did, right? Like way at the beginning, I was an aide floating around the county and then just fell in love with it. And that was it. So you know, so I think it's one of those things to just keep in mind that like there are a lot of great resources. There's a lot of great ways to get in. Some of the STEM initiatives have been phenomenal. And we had good curriculum trained individuals who looked at what was out there and said, well, this is missing. And then they built it and put it in. You know, creative curriculum is probably the best curriculum out there for early learning, but there's still some gaps, and that's okay. Not everything's going to be perfect. So really being able to see how high quality professionals really elevate things and create a space where kids are really excited about learning. You know, even my highest needs children are like jumping into the STEM projects because it lives in the neurodivergent world, right? Like this is their, it's not the box, get rid of the box. And so, you know, I think that's a neat kind of high quality piece where we're saying like, this doesn't have to look like it always did. and kids are really into it. So,
Yes, Senate mentioned, education is different from 20 years ago, which hurt my feelings a little bit because I originally imagined myself little 20 years ago and I was not. But I'm on the board for the Manheim Township Education Foundation and we're granting coding of the Oregon Trail. And I think you're probably all closest in age to me and you remember the original Oregon Trail. And
you.
kids now coding robots, which is not something even 20 years ago, or when I first did the Oregon Trail, I would have imagined as a piece of curriculum, but it's preparing kids from a very early age who learn differently than we do, and also having to train teachers, right, to teach an entirely different kind of student, a student who can code the Oregon Trail, which I don't know how my computer works. I can't imagine coding the Oregon Trail. We have two, just I think more statements in our chat, and it echoes a lot of what we've been talking about: training for teachers and training programs for parents from Deborah Polite, and then also re-emphasizing the health and wellness for children. And I think that's a very important reminder that hungry kids or kids with trauma aren't learning and aren't progressing to those next stages. So holistic, whole child development. And Lily's waving at me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's interesting that nutrition came up because something that I think is going very unseen is the impact on the cost of food
Mm.
for care. So, we are seeing it. Head Start by its nature has a nutrition initiative. And that's great, except for the cost of food is too expensive. We don't get reimbursed the full rate, and we don't charge families to pay for food. So, it's one of the kind of like probably low hanging fruit would be the investment in early learning nutrition resources from the community to say like, hey, I can donate, $10,000 from our business for your nutrition work. That can offset the care of fresh fruit versus canned fruit. And that is a decision we're making, just genuinely, completely straight up. So
Really important awareness to raise, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
unintended connectedness of everything, unintended consequences, where the world is. I appreciate it. Lisa, you keep talking about money, so I'm going to ask you the money question too. How do we ensure increased funding for early childhood education translates into meaningful improvements in access and quality?
Great question. I think the very easy, simple answer to that is obviously those numbers go down, right? What Lily showed us in the beginning, that we are serving more families, we're serving more children, we're providing them with access and allowing them to receive these services. Yes, I think also when we look at what it looks like when our little learners are going into kindergarten, when they are starting off, where are they? What do they already know? What experiences have they already had? So when they get into kindergarten, they are successful. We stress a lot on academics, but like we all know, social emotional learning and those skills are essential. They are so very important to make sure that they can continue with those academic skills. So I think seeing where our learners are once they get into school, and then obviously tracking them, right? We want to make sure that we're not just getting to kindergarten, but we're continuing to be successful throughout their whole entire school experience. And then obviously graduating or going on to some type of career or post-secondary choice. College isn't for everybody, and that's okay, but we want to make sure it doesn't necessarily need to look like continuing education, but we want to make sure that they're continuing into something, a career, some type of employment path, so that way they will be able to provide for the next generation of their families. So I think there's some very short-term ways of saying we're succeeding and things are going well, but then there's also that long-term effect. We really have to make sure that what we're doing now has a focus of what the future will look like for these children. Being able to provide those resources for their children and kind of continuing. We talk about generational poverty all the time. There are so many things that we can do now to help break that cycle. It may take a couple generations and it may take, some things, but we really need to focus on that as well. So it's not just lowering numbers. It's not just filling up childcare centers and saying, all right, everybody's being served. It's looking at what is happening throughout their childhood, throughout their school experience, and then into adulthood as well.
Yeah, very important point. Thank you for that. I think it was last week, the LNP had an article even about the School District of Lancaster now having teacher training programs, which I thought was interesting because it's a long-term solution for both workplace deficits, but also making sure our students have meaningful employment and we're helping that next generation. So looking down the path is just as important as tomorrow and the next day, isn't it? Senate, we're getting close to the end here. How do we sell this to our community? How do we build broader consensus in the community about the importance of early childhood education?
Yeah, I think that, for us, that one, I think it's about really knowledge building, right? And collaboration, right? So I think that we still have to, I think, still get the message out there. And I think I think part of the message has got to be like making the business case for early childhood education, which I think we've done. I think that there's a lot of research that's out there about the business case. Like we know what early childhood education does. We know that the return on investment that's there. But it's once again, like, how do we get more to action to some of the points that were made earlier that of saying that, like, how do we get businesses and more folks into this? And I think that the more that we can have discussions like today, with really smart people that are really thinking about this really deeply, I think that is really going to really be for us. And I think that for the more that we can tie, I think, to just what Lisa was, I think, just talking a little bit about is that how do we tie this to actually outcomes? Like, what's the actual outcome in investing this money, right? So in investing however much money that we're investing in it, what's the outcome that's going to come out of this? And how do we then kind of see that as a broader benefit for us as a community and as a society? And it's not just about getting kids in the seats, but there's actually going to be something that will be better for us and that this actually helps all of us, whether you have a kid in a program or you don't, right? Because it lifts the whole society and lifts all the boats up. And how do we get people to understand that? Because every time a mom or a dad can't go to work because of not having childcare, that is someone that's not in the actual workforce, that then puts more strain on the folks that are in the workforce that are working there. So it is all so interconnected. And I think the more we can continue to talk about this across the board, and it can't just be ECE providers talking about this. Business professionals have to talk about this. K through 12 has to talk about this. Colleges have to talk about this. Nonprofits, everybody across the board has to be talking about this, and really coming to really some really good solutions of how we then move to the next and to actually get this thing moving. And we've had movement. Not to say there has not been legislation, there's not already been some movement, but we still need more movement if we want to get to where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, excellent point. We're all here together, having conversations in our bubble. So how do we make the bubble wider so everyone is a part of the solution, and not just a short-term solution, but a long-term solution is a very important point. We're at the end here, folks. We are at 11:57, and I'm going to trust you to be succinct panelists and say one thing, magic wand, one thing to contribute towards solutions for this. What would it be? And Loretta, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm going to start with you because you're in such a relaxing field of flowers, and I know you'll be ready for me.
Yes, relaxing flowers. It is, if I had that magic wand, it would be, again, to make sure it's the educational piece and making sure it all ties together for people for understanding. And I'm not really succinct, so I apologize. But we talk about childcare centers, but I just want to bring up like way our family and childcare homes, making sure folks are aware they're out there, that they're certified. How can we support the children going to those? So my magic wand would just be to really continue what just said, to continue these conversations and see what supports we can give. How can we raise awareness? How can we help the teacher wages go up? How can we support our family and group homes as well as our centers? So that's really a very broad perspective, but that's my wand. I want these conversations to continue because, like I said, sometimes we get moving and then something gets lost along the line. So to really keep these conversations moving forward.
Thanks, Loretta. Lisa.
I would say collaboration. I just think that if we all have something to offer and we all have something to give in this area, and whether you're a business, you're a nonprofit, you are a school district, you are a faith-based organization, whatever it is, everybody has something that they can contribute, and having conversations and talking about what we have to offer and being creative with that collaboration, I think is really important.
Thanks. Lily.
It's a little bit like Lisa's, but I definitely say whole family collaborative services, that really are supported by stable funding. at a variety of levels, right? State, federal, local, business, philanthropic. I think we can do this. You know, I think it's one of those things, situations that like, it's probably not that complex. It is complex, but like the real solution is probably not that complex. It's just hard to put all the people at the table. So when we think about the whole family approach that is collaborative and how everybody comes in, that's my magic wand. That everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, we can do that. And not just the child, but the whole family. So
Thanks. Senate.
Yeah, no, just to echo what everybody's already, I think, said, or collaboration seems like the word of the day. But yeah, just a system of support, right? Of like, once again, how do we support one another through all of this? The one idea that I think that I've loved that I heard today, just about this shared services model. Like, is there ways to once again drive down costs that then allow us to, think about our business model, right? Of early childhood education. So one is just getting funds in, but the other thing could also be also, how do you drive costs down by partnering with one another? But the only way that actually happens is that's through collaboration. I think the more we can collaborate with one another and figure out what are those ways that we might be able to support one another, that I think is going to help us with our collective effort of where we're trying to be as NEC.
Well, thank you for collaborating with me on this conversation today, friends. I think it's a very important, not start, continuance. This work is happening. Thank you for the work you do every day to impact the lives of families in our community. Thank you again to Catherine Hershey School, CHS, for sponsoring this session. And those of you who are on the call watching this or watching a recording, we will email out resources. So I believe we'll send Lily's presentation and maybe not the diaper changing video. Folks will have to Google that on their own.
Find that
But
your own.
if there's something we referenced today and you would like a copy of, let us know and we will make sure we get it out to the distribution list. But thank you all for your time and for the important work you do. We are so very grateful for you.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.